Number 8. Plague Doctor. What if your daily job meant walking directly into cities filled with disease and death? One of the worst jobs in history was being a plague doctor during major outbreaks such as the Black Death and later plague epidemics across Europe. Plague doctors were hired to treat victims, record deaths, and sometimes remove bodies during terrifying disease outbreaks that devastated entire populations. At a time when medicine poorly understood infection, these doctors often worked with limited tools and dangerous misconceptions about disease transmission. The most famous image associated with them is the long-beaked mask. People today often think it looked terrifying by design, but the beak was filled with herbs, flowers, and scented materials because many believed disease spread through poisonous air or bad smells. Even with protective clothing, however, plague doctors faced enormous risk. Cities overwhelmed by sickness became scenes of panic. Families died inside homes. Mass graves appeared. Fear spread faster than accurate medical knowledge. What made the job especially horrifying was isolation. Many people avoided the sick entirely. Plague doctors entered those spaces anyway. Some genuinely tried to help despite limited understanding. Others were poorly trained or desperate for income because qualified physicians sometimes fled outbreaks. The work exposed them constantly to suffering, infection, and psychological trauma. Imagine walking through silent plague streets every day, entering homes filled with dying patients while bells rang for the dead outside. No antibiotics, no modern sanitation, no certainty you would survive the week. A profession trapped between medicine and catastrophe during one of humanity's deadliest eras. Number 7. Gong Farmer. What if your entire job was climbing into pits filled with human waste? One of the absolute worst jobs in medieval history was being a gong farmer in England and other parts of Europe. Despite the strange name, gong farmers performed an essential but horrifying task: removing human waste from cesspits and primitive toilets before cities became overwhelmed by filth. In crowded medieval towns, waste systems were extremely limited. Many homes emptied into pits beneath buildings or nearby storage areas. When those pits filled, someone had to clean them manually. That someone was the gong farmer. The work usually happened at night because the smell and conditions were unbearable for the public during daytime. Workers climbed into cesspits using buckets and shovels, hauling waste out by hand before transporting it away from populated areas. The danger went far beyond disgust. Toxic gases could build up inside pits, causing workers to lose consciousness or die from suffocation. Disease exposure was constant. Cuts or infections could become deadly in eras without modern medicine. What made the job especially disturbing was social status. The work was necessary for cities to function, yet gong farmers were often looked down upon because of the filth surrounding the occupation. Some were paid relatively well compared with other laborers, precisely because so few people wanted the job. But money did not remove the danger or misery. Imagine spending nights underground surrounded by toxic fumes and human waste while entire cities slept above you. No protective equipment, no sanitation systems, just darkness, smell, and survival. One of civilization's dirtiest jobs, keeping medieval streets from becoming even worse than they already were. Number 6. Body snatching. What if your job depended on stealing freshly buried bodies from graves at night? One of the darkest occupations in history involved the practice of body snatching during the 18th and 19th centuries, especially in places like United Kingdom and the United States. As medical schools expanded, doctors and anatomy students desperately needed human bodies for study and surgical training. But legal supplies of cadavers were extremely limited. That shortage created a disturbing underground business. Body snatchers, sometimes called resurrectionists, secretly dug up recently buried corpses and sold them to medical institutions. The work happened mostly at night. Fresh graves were targeted because decomposition reduced scientific usefulness. Families began guarding cemeteries, using iron cages called mortsafes, and hiring watchmen to protect loved ones from grave robbers. What made the profession especially horrifying was moral atmosphere. The dead were treated as commodities. Fear spread through communities because burial no longer guaranteed peace. Some notorious criminal cases became even darker when murder itself was committed to provide bodies for sale, shocking the public and helping push governments toward legal reforms. Eventually, anatomy laws changed in several countries to regulate cadaver supply more formally. But before those reforms, grave robbery became an eerie part of medical history. What makes the job so disturbing is contradiction. Modern medicine benefited enormously from anatomical study, yet some of that knowledge was built through illegal nighttime theft from cemeteries. Imagine digging into fresh graves under darkness, listening for approaching families or police. Knowing the cargo beside you was once a living person, a profession existing between science, crime, and fear. Before we continue, comment which one surprised you most so far. And subscribe, because the next one gets even crazier. Number 5. Chimney Sweep. What if children were forced to crawl through chimneys barely wider than their bodies? One of the cruelest jobs in history was being a chimney sweep during the Industrial Revolution and earlier urban periods in places like England. As cities filled with houses heated by coal fires, chimneys regularly clogged with soot. Without cleaning, dangerous chimney fires could erupt. The solution many employers chose was horrifying, using children small enough to climb inside the narrow shafts. Some children were extremely young. They crawled upward through tight, filthy chimneys, scraping soot from the walls while breathing thick smoke and dust. The work was dangerous in multiple ways. Children could become trapped inside narrow passages, some suffocated. Others suffered burns if fires had not cooled properly. Falls, deformities, lung disease, and chronic illness were common after years of exposure. Many children also lived in brutal conditions under abusive employers who treated them as tools rather than human beings. What made the job especially disturbing was normalization. For years, society accepted the sight of children blackened with soot climbing through dangerous chimneys because cheap labor made the system profitable. Reformers later fought to ban the practice and improve child labor laws, but change came slowly. The occupation eventually became one of the defining symbols of industrial exploitation. Imagine spending childhood crawling through dark shafts, unable to stand upright, breathing toxic soot while hearing scraping echoes around you. No safety gear, no real protection, just poverty forcing children into spaces adults could not enter. A job that kept homes warm. At the cost of childhood itself. Number 4. Coal trapper. What if your job as a child meant sitting alone underground in total darkness for entire days? One of the bleakest occupations in industrial history was being a coal trapper in 19th century coal mines, especially in places like United Kingdom. Coal mines relied on ventilation systems to move air through underground tunnels. Trap doors placed throughout the mine helped control airflow. Someone had to open and close those doors whenever carts passed. That task was often assigned to children. Very young children. A coal trapper would sit beside a wooden door deep underground for long hours, sometimes beginning work before sunrise and returning home after dark. Most of the time, they sat completely alone. No sunlight, minimal conversation, just darkness, cold tunnels, and the sound of distant mining activity echoing through the earth. When carts approached, the child opened the door briefly, then closed it again to maintain ventilation. The work sounded simple. The environment was not. Mines were filled with dust, collapse risk, flooding danger, poor air quality, and explosions caused by gas buildup. Children worked surrounded by all of it. What made the job especially disturbing was psychological isolation. Some trappers reportedly spent entire shifts with little human interaction. Many were exhausted, frightened, or half asleep underground while performing repetitive labor for survival wages. Industrial society depended heavily on coal, and part of that system relied on children sitting alone in darkness to keep air moving beneath the earth. Imagine being 8 years old, locked underground beside a door for 12 hours, hearing only carts, chains, and distant echoes in the mine. A childhood spent underground so industry above ground could continue. Number 3. Leech collecting. What if your job required walking through swamps while blood-sucking parasites attached themselves to your skin? One of history's strangest and most unpleasant jobs was being a leech collector during the 18th and 19th centuries. At the time, bloodletting remained common in parts of medicine, and doctors used medicinal leeches extensively for treatments. Demand became so high that people were hired specifically to gather leeches from wetlands, ponds, and marshes. The process was miserable. Plectrics often entered muddy water barefoot or with exposed legs because movement and body heat attracted leeches more effectively. The animals attached themselves directly to the skin. After enough gathered, Collectors removed them carefully and stored them for sale. The work was slow, painful, and exhausting. And because the job involved standing in stagnant water for long periods, workers also faced infections, illness, and harsh weather conditions. What made the occupation especially disturbing was repetition. This was not one accidental encounter with parasites. It was daily labor built around letting them feed on you. Some collectors reportedly became weak from blood loss over time, especially when working continuously under poor conditions. The job also reflected desperation. Many people accepted dangerous labor because survival left few alternatives. Meanwhile, the medical system's huge demand for leeches created an entire economy around swamp collection. Imagine spending your workday knee-deep in cold marsh water, feeling parasites slowly attach across your skin while insects swarmed around you. No protective equipment, no comfort, just mud, disease, and bloodletting commerce, a profession where your own body became part of the bait. If you're enjoying this list so far, hit like and subscribe now, because the craziest ones are still coming. Number 2. Rat catching. What if your daily job meant hunting disease carrying rats through filthy city streets and sewers? One of the most horrifying jobs in history was being a rat catcher. Before modern sanitation and pest control, rats overwhelmed many cities across Europe and beyond. They infested homes, markets, docks, warehouses, and sewer systems while spreading fear during major disease outbreaks. Rat catchers became essential because uncontrolled infestations threatened food supplies and public health. The work was brutal. Some catchers used traps, dogs, poison, or bare hands to capture rats in crowded urban environments. Others entered sewers, basements, and plague-ridden neighborhoods where rodents multiplied rapidly. The danger was constant. Rats carried parasites and diseases, including fleas connected historically to outbreaks such as the Black Death. Even outside plague eras, bites, infections, contaminated environments, and toxic chemicals made the profession extremely risky. What made the job especially disturbing was environment: rotting waste, dark tunnels, flooded sewers, swarming rodents moving through garbage and dead animals. Yet cities depended on these workers to prevent infestations from becoming catastrophic. Some rat catchers even became locally famous for their unusual methods or huge catches, turning survival into a grim profession. Imagine climbing into sewer tunnels carrying cages and traps while hearing rats moving in darkness around you. No modern protective gear, no clean conditions, just disease, filth, and thousands of rodents beneath the city. A job that protected public health by forcing workers directly into some of the dirtiest places imaginable. Number 1. Fulling. What if your job required standing around vats of human urine every single day? One of the absolute worst jobs in ancient history was being a fuller, especially in places like the Roman Empire. Fullers worked in the textile industry cleaning, thickening, and processing cloth. At first, that may not sound terrible. Then comes the method. One common cleaning substance used in ancient fulling was human urine. Why? Because urine breaks down into ammonia compounds that help remove oils and dirt from fabric. Cities even collected urine publicly for industrial use. Workers placed clothing or cloth into vats filled with liquid mixtures and physically stomped on the fabric for long periods to clean and process it. Imagine spending entire days ankle-deep in foul-smelling chemical waste while breathing heavy fumes inside crowded workshops. The smell alone would have been unbearable, but conditions became worse. Fulling workshops often involved exposure to harsh chemicals, poor ventilation, and exhausting physical labor. Workers handled dirty garments repeatedly while standing in contaminated liquids. Skin irritation and respiratory problems were likely common. What made the job especially disturbing was normality. This was not considered bizarre at the time. It was part of ordinary urban industry. People needed clean clothing, and fullers performed the work society depended on. The occupation became so associated with urine collection that even public urination had economic value in some Roman cities. Imagine waking every morning knowing your workday involves soaking fabrics in waste and stomping them clean by foot. No gloves, no hygiene standards, just survival through one of history's filthiest industries. A civilization famous for roads, engineering, and empire, still relying on vats of urine to wash clothes. Which job sounded the worst to you? Comment below. Like if you enjoyed this list. Subscribe for more insane videos like this. See you in the next one.